Hello, my beautiful lab rats. My name is Darian, and welcome to Scientifically Speaking. This podcast will be about science, about research, mental health, and the tea about academia. For today's episode, our guest is a really good friend of mine who is also a former colleague. We talk about her med school journey, and we also talk about toxic lab environments. Enjoy! Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my very first episode of my podcast, Scientifically Speaking. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy to say that this is my own podcast. But today we are joined by one of my great friends, Jessi Cox. I love your last name. And we used to work in the same lab a couple of years ago. You are now a first-year medical student at the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. You have a master's degree from where again?
Missouri State.
Hot, sexy. And we used to work in the same lab after you got your master's. It's been a long time since we've talked, and I think the last time we even saw each other was in Houston. You drove up and then we had a little date. We went to a couple of gardens and we grabbed ice cream together. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. I've been wanting to take my mom to the botanical gardens, but I have not yet.
Oh, I miss it so much. The last time I went was with my current boyfriend. And that is something that I've been meaning to tell you. We've been dating for almost 3 months now. We met on Tinder.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
I want to bring him to the picnic that we talked about with Maria.
Yeah.
So how is medical school so far?
It's been good. This block has been a little bit more stressful. So how our classes work is we do like a scientific block for like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we have one class that runs the whole year, just called Practice of Medicine. And that's more just like how to be a physician, like physical exam skills, interviewing patients, and it's pretty chill. And then the current class I'm in right now is called Pathology and Host Defense. So it's pretty much immunology, pathology, microbiology, and histology into one course. And right now we're in the microbiology portion of it. So just cramming as many bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites in my head as I can.
I remember like microbiology was one of my favorite classes in undergrad. I felt like it was so rewarding learning everything, and like I feel like it's so applicable to a lot of the things to like everyday life.
Yeah.
You were telling me how actually it's funny that right before we started this podcast, I randomly FaceTimed you and was like, "Hey, want to be on my very first episode of my podcast?" And you were so excited. And this was honestly just like an impromptu recording, and I was like, you have to be on this podcast. You have to be the very first person. You know, the whole point of this podcast is going to be like us talking about science, us talking about research, mental health, spilling tea, whether it be science or research or just like about our lives. And I was like, you are the perfect person to be on this podcast with. So I'm very honored that you're here right now.
Well, thank you. It means a lot that you asked me, especially your first guest. I feel very honored.
Oh, I need to start a timer because I honestly don't want to go overboard. I want to keep this within like 45-ish minutes. I'm going to start a timer right now. Okay. And then I'll keep an eye on this timer. I can assume that like we've been talking for 3-5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason why I was like, Jessi, you're the perfect person to be on this podcast with is because we're both laughing because we know what we want to talk about. And for everyone who's listening, you're like, what are we laughing about? Like, oh my God, we want to know. I think what really brought me and Jessi together, like why we bonded so well and what's the nicest way to say this? How fun our previous lab was. I mean, okay, it was fun.
It was fun.
Like it was definitely the research is fun, but I think we can both agree that the management was not.
Yeah,
it
was not the best. I will say though, out of all the labs I've worked in, these are my favorite group of coworkers. So if you could have fixed the management, we would have had a great lab.
But before I talk about our research experience, can you talk about your very first, I guess, lab that you're in No, not the first lab. Your master's, I guess. Is that the
Yeah.
right thing to say? Your master's lab, the
Yeah.
lab that you're in for your master's.
Yeah. So I started that one. I was actually in two labs at the time when I started that one. I've been always interested in cardiology. So I started in a research lab that was focusing more on like the cardiology aspect for what I was planning on doing my master's with.
Yeah.
And then for my honors college at Missouri State, like we had to do like honors credit with like research with one of the classes we were currently in,
Hmm.
and lined up with my lab that I ended up getting my master's in that was focusing more on neuroscience. And so I was working in both labs at the time, and I could tell like the neuroscience lab, I really liked the professor.
Yeah.
He's by far my favorite professor. It was like very well funded. It was an NIH grant. It was more we
Sexy.
had more lab space. Yeah, much. It was a lot better. So anyway, I worked for both labs in one semester, and then I finally talked to my master's PI about switching over and being there full time, and he was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And I just
I
remember
remember.
being so excited. Like, I mean, I was in tears. I was so excited to be in this lab because I remember that was my sophomore year, into my sophomore year when I joined that lab, and he was my first professor at Missouri State. And
Gotcha.
in the beginning of lecture, if we got there early, he would always talk about his research. And I just remember being a ridiculously annoying freshman, being so excited about this research
I don't think
that
it's
he was doing.
annoying. I think it's good that you're like showing how like interested you are in his research. I think from a PI's perspective, I want that student in my lab. Exactly
Yeah,
what his research was about?
it was pretty much all oral facial pain.
Yeah.
And so mine was over temporomandibular joint disorder, is what my master's was over.
Girl, I
So
have
it's a bunch of
no idea what
different,
you just said.
like TMJ. You've heard of TMJ, right? Like
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay,
lockjaw.
okay. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like it was like over lockjaw. And we had like different. What was really cool about our labs, like we had different components of it. Like we had a chemistry lab within our lab, we had a micro lab within our lab, we had a cell, an
Mm.
immunohistochemistry, and then like just data. Like we had a massive lab space. Like what we were at our lab, we worked together. Like that whole room would have been just our lab plus another like two rooms that size. Um,
Oh, for
and
those that don't know, our
yeah, it was
lab, like our whole, what you're saying is like half of that our floor would be your
yeah,
lab. Oh,
all
okay,
of
that's big.
that entire floor, yeah, would have been our entire lab space would have been just our lab instead of sharing it with the labs that we shared it with. So it was really cool. Like it was such an experience. And honestly, once I went to other labs, I was like, wow, I had it like the setup, the environment was really nice there. So pretty much I worked there, and then I became really good, even friends with my PI. We became super close to each other. I actually went to his church for Christmas Eve mass.
I
Got to meet
remember
his
you
family.
telling me that, which blew my mind. I was like, okay, you guys
Yeah,
are really, really close.
yeah, we were super close. And then he ended up having some health issues, went and visited him in the hospital, like super tight.
Yeah.
And I applied to med school once, and he wrote my letter of recommendation, obviously. And he was talking about how good of a letter of recommendation he wrote. It was like 5 to 6 pages, which I'm like,
Wow.
I haven't written any letter recommendations for anyone, but I feel like that's excessive.
I'm thinking if
And
single space, if it's single space, that's
yeah,
impressive. Double space,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I guess.
But like we had such a good relationship throughout my first 2 years. And
Yeah.
then we started, like, I was working on my research, and the research data was just like not showing anything significant. Like literally everything stained, everything we cultured, everything was just
Yikes.
insignificant. ELISAs, immunohistory, everything was insignificant. And it was frustrating for both of us.
Hmm.
But I think one of the important points that you need to learn early on is that just because research is failing doesn't mean you're failing at research. It's very
Definitely.
two separate things.
Hands down. If
And
anything, it teaches you
yeah,
how to get back up.
yeah, exactly. But PIs like to clump them, make them feel clumped together, like you're doing something wrong, or at least something did.
Oh,
And
yep.
so
You're telling me.
you already know.
It's like we're building this up. We're building this up. But I'm sorry. Keep going. Keep going.
um, and that was the road this lab was headed down as well. Was no data was working, none of my experiments were working. It's simply like my entire thesis story was that what we did for 3.5 years was not significant. And I
Mm.
remember,
Hello, everyone. I apologize, but my friend kindly asked me to remove this section of the podcast out because honestly, too much tea was spilled. I really wish I could keep it in, but I don't want her career to be ruined, so we're resuming right now. Okay.
I
I
had
remember
to
you telling
present.
me the story, I think within a week of you working in our lab, and my jaw was just
Yeah,
like, are you
yeah.
serious?
I'm presenting my thesis in one day. I'm
Girl.
probably not going to go, not going to go somewhere else right
Now,
now.
this is probably a dumb question, but the next day when you presented, did you think about what happened the day before? Like, did that affect you and how you presented your data?
So what I ended up doing, like for your thesis committee, you have like three professors on there. One is your PI and then two are
Right.
two others. And I had a really good relationship with one of the other professors. And so I went to him and just was like, listen, this is what's happened. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like successfully finish my thesis. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know if I should even like present. And he was like, go ahead and present, and like just really calmed me down. He's like, you present, you do
That's
your
good.
research. And he's like, the questions, I will make sure that any question I ask, you know the answer to, so you don't get stumbled
Oh
up.
my gosh,
Um, he
yes.
he came in, he came in clutch for me. He came through for me. So then whenever I was presenting, my parents were there, and you know how close I am with my mom.
Right. Okay,
And so
just
I
to
just
backtrack, I will never forget when it was your mom's birthday. She was turning, I don't remember the number, let's say
60.
30. 30.
Okay. It
And
was 60, but okay.
and you wrote 60 things I like about you. It was like at least 5 pages, handwritten. But anyway, yeah, so your mom was
And
at your defense.
yes, she's my bestie, obviously. So I just looked at her the whole time. And then we get done, and he asked me questions, and then like questions I didn't know, he like helped me answer, like was not trying to like throw me under the bus. And then
That's
we
good.
get done. I leave the room. They like talk about if I defended my thesis successfully or not. I come back in, and he's like, yeah, you defended it successfully. You're good. And then it was just him and I left in the room. And I was like, I need a witness. And here from now on, like, and you know my
That's
new tactic about voice
smart on your
recording,
part.
and
Yeah.
this is where that tactic,
Yeah.
that's where that tactic comes about, because I really wish I would have
Oh,
had it.
oh my
And
gosh.
he's like, I'm so impressed by your presentation. You did such a great job. Like, I am so pleased by it. And then I was gonna have applied to med school again. I did not get in med school. I moved down to Texas. We know the story. And I was going to apply to med school again. And then like a week later, out of nowhere, I hadn't emailed him asking for a letter. I haven't reached out to him, nothing. I left the lab after I defended my thesis, and he sent me
Right.
a page-long email about how he will not be able to write me a letter recommendation. He would not recommend me for med school, and
I
all kinds
remember
of stuff.
this. Oh
And so,
no.
no, I don't think the congratulations was genuine at all.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Jessi, my beautiful Cox. I remember you telling me all of this during your first week in lab, and I remember interviewing you, and after we interviewed, I checked in with our PI and gave them my thoughts about you, and obviously said like great things about you. And I think because
you did
I
that. You did that with the PI too, which I really appreciated.
yes, yeah,
You
and
said you said great things about the PI too. You really set
and
me up for success.
well, well, I at the time I felt bad telling the full honest truth about the PI. And a
A
part of me
great
what
friendship came out of it.
actually a huge part of me knew that we would work very, very well together. So I was being a little selfish there. I think because I worked in the lab for so long at that point, my opinion about you weighed more than other people in the lab. And so I think once I said great things about you to the PI, we hired you like immediately. So you were hired to be our research coordinator. You know, after you were hired, I gave you some warning signs about the lab. And I think that's when you started opening up about your previous lab experience. I guess how long did it take for you to realize something's a little off about this lab?
It was the first day you were doing a lab presentation.
Oh my god, yes. Oh, okay.
You were doing a lab presentation
Ooh,
at 8 a.m.
I remember. Oh
And
my
I texted
gosh.
my mom during it, and I was like, if she ever talks to me the way that she talked to Darian, I am out of here.
I remember. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I guess to backtrack, our PI has very high expectations, not for only for like everyone in the lab, but like she has high expectations for herself. And I think because I worked there the longest, I was treated like I guess the oldest child, and so there are a lot of high expectations, placed on me. On top of that, we're at like a very prestigious institution, and I'm giving lab meeting, and note that there are only, I think at this point, 3 or 4 people in lab. There's me, you, postdoc, lab manager, PI. It was just us. Yeah, because postdoc was already there, right? When you started. Yes, yes, yes. Postdoc trained you. Me and postdoc, well, lab manager too, trained you. But your first day in lab was my lab meeting, and I gave lab meeting like once a month. And I don't know why, but our PI really liked to pick on me. And there's a difference between like picking on me and like picking on someone and like, sending them constructive criticism, but it was just full on like giving me like condescending remarks and all that. And I think it was in the middle of this presentation when I was just kind of fed up with, her attitude towards me. And I think I was being a little petty and I gave some attitude back. And that only made the situation worse. And I remember just arguing back. And that was honestly my first time ever giving her an attitude back. And it was unfortunate that was your first day. And we had a one-on-one talk in her office. Her whole story was, Darian, if in the future, if anyone gives you constructive criticism, like you have to handle it well. And it's so hard to tell her, like, I can handle constructive criticism, but it's the way that you're saying. There's a difference between like, hey, I think next time you need to fix this, then your presentation is shit, you're shit, you're a dumb scientist, you go to hell. There's a difference. And you can't be like, you can't tell me to go to hell. Darian, you need to accept constructive criticism better. And that's obviously an exaggerated form, but every time I tell, every time I tell someone outside of the lab about this experience, there's always like a look of just them being hesitant, like, is it really the PI or are you just being sensitive? And it's frustrating when there's that sense of doubt in them. And I remember actually after you left, we hired a new postdoc. Let's call them postdoc number 3, because I think they actually are postdoc number 3. And I was kind of giving them a heads up, like, hey, this lab is beware for these things. And they were like, maybe you're just being a little sensitive. Maybe because you're so young, you haven't been in so many labs yet. You don't know what a toxic lab feels like. And I said, well, I don't, I'm not going to win anything if I win this debate. 5 months after I left the lab, that postdoc quit because they were like, this lab is so toxic, I'm getting out. And actually joined industry, or left for the industry, and now they work at Pfizer. It's hard to talk about this lab without honestly sounding whiny. I was there for so long because I was kind of trained and learned that is the typical environment. And I guess I didn't really realize things once you joined. My family members are just like, Darren, you got to get out. Girl, you in trouble. You got to get out. I was like, no, like my PI kept reassuring me that this is how academia feels like. I'm in the right place. And this is where I'm supposed to be. After I left and when I looked back at that experience, I realized like, oh my gosh, like it was very abusive. And they always say when someone is in an abusive relationship, they're not aware that they're in an abusive relationship until they're out of it. And it really is like that. I remember once you joined, we experienced a lot of things together. I remember one of the things that I hated was being micromanaged. And they were our PI was constantly looking over our shoulders over everything. And I hear a lot of grad students complaining that their PIs are never there. And whenever they need feedback on something, the PI is never there. Well, our former PI is on the opposite side of the spectrum where they're always trying to check in with us, always wanting to know exactly what we're doing. Why aren't we in lab? Texting us, calling us, slacking us.
Darren and I one time got in trouble. We got in trouble for taking too long to go get water. I remember one time.
Oh my. Oh, because
or spending too long in the bathroom.
oh my. Okay, not gonna lie. I think that is a fair thing to. Well, we got water fairly quickly. Like it wasn't even 5 minutes, and just the fact that we were both gone at the same time made her like a little suspicious. And when we came back together, I think she probably thought that like we were fooling around and we goofed off. Ooh, I think another important thing to talk about is like we were both non-exempt workers, meaning we get paid hourly. We can only work 40 hours a week. If we work overtime, then we have to get paid overtime. And I think at that point, I was very invested in my project, and so I didn't mind working at least 40 hours a week or more than 40 hours a week. And I never not clocked in, but I never wrote on the timesheet that I worked more than 40 hours. And so even though I worked like 60, 80 hours, I would only get paid 40 hours, and which I didn't mind because, it's like it's research and I was very passionate about it. But you, on the other hand, you lived in Galveston. This girl would wake up, drive from Galveston to Houston, and then drive back. How long is a commute? I want to say like an hour and a half, like from your apartment to the lab, because you had to drive
an hour and a half.
Oh,
especially at 8 and 5 traffic. Like if I would have gone like at different times, it probably would have been like an hour and 15. But yeah, it was normally about an hour and a half. And I also was not invested in a project because I had just started, and I was also studying MCAT. So I was working 40 hours a week, period. That's what I got paid for. That's what I was going to do.
And so you would wake up from your apartment, drive to Houston, park in Smithland's parking lot. You would park in that parking lot, catch the shuttle. The shuttle would take you from that parking lot to the medical center in front of the lab. Or not in front of the lab, but like, a couple feet away. And the shuttle would stop running at 5 p.m.? 6. Is it 5 p.m. or 6 p.m.?
It's 6.
6 p.m. Oh, yes, I remember. It would stop running.
Very late anyway.
It would stop running at 6. And after the shuttle stopped running, the only way to get back to the parking lot is to catch the metro. But walking from lab to the metro was pretty far and kind of unsafe. So a lot of people would try to catch the shuttle before 6. And because you needed to get back home and study and take your MCAT class, you had to catch the shuttle, and plus you had to leave lab at a good time. You would catch the shuttle before 6. And I remember our PI was not happy about that because I'm staying late in lab, and so that meant you should stay late too. I think our goals are a little bit different. Like I am doing research to get into graduate school. You're doing research to get into medical school, but your main priority is the MCAT, studying for the MCAT. And so our PI would try to manipulate you for you to stay later in lab by saying, oh, if you stayed later in lab, that'll help you on your MCAT because you're applying your knowledge to some of the experiments. And, maybe if you want to perform better, you just need to stay in lab later. So manipulative. And one thing that I really admired about you is that we're the complete opposite when it comes to this. I don't have a backbone, girl. I'm a pushover. Like I'm a pushover. I'm a people pleaser. You set your boundaries and you said, no, I am going home. I need to catch the shuttle. And she would always try to manipulate you, but you never gave in. Whereas I'm like, you're right. I will stay here till midnight.
Yeah. I remember missing the shuttle one time, and I'm also, to go back, from a very small town, less than 1,000 people. So metro is like going to a foreign country for me. And I remember one time I missed it and had to catch the metro, and I just called my mom freaking out, and I was like, I am in downtown Houston. I don't know what the freaking metro is. I think I'll just walk. It's only like 2 miles away. I ended up
Girl.
walking back to a parking lot one night. Yeah, it was horrible.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
horrible. But
Wait,
most
what?
times
Where was
I
I?
would
Why
do
didn't you call me?
you're probably working.
Okay, I think
For the
maybe.
most part, I would always catch a shuttle. I think I missed it once and I was like, this will not be happening again.
Ooh, okay. So I definitely want to talk about the time. I think this was probably 3 or 4 months after you started working. And
I only lasted 3 months there, so it could not have
wait,
been
no, no,
more.
no, 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 no. I'm thinking of the other research tech. She worked there for 6 months. You only worked there for 3 months.
Yeah.
One day, I think right before I caught the shuttle, I went to go grab coffee with another research tech from another lab. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. We grabbed coffee and let's call them person A. I was grabbing coffee with person A at Starbucks, and they invited their cousin, person B, to join coffee to grab coffee with us. And we are drinking coffee, and me and person B were both research techs, and so we were just trading like research tech stories. I worked in one building and they worked in another building, and so I just kind of wanted to we kind of wanted to compare our experiences and see what the buildings are like and how our labs are like and whatnot. And I told them that, yeah, I would work overtime, but I didn't mind. And every day, to avoid catching the metro to go to the parking lot, I would catch the shuttle, go to the parking lot, move my car from that parking lot to the garage
Hmm.
that's attached to our building because that garage opens up after 5. And so I would do that every day. So catch the shuttle, parking lot, move car from parking lot to garage. And when I told person B that, person B was like, oh my gosh, you're that research tech. I was like, what do you mean? You're that research tech that moves his car. Literally, like, some people in my lab were talking about you, and I didn't know it was you. Oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. I was like, okay, like, I didn't think too much about it. I want to say that this was like on a Thursday. No, no, no. This was like on a Wednesday. And I remember telling you the story, and we're like, okay, we're going to be a little evil. What if we told our PI this story, but twisted some things just to mess with
Just
them.
tweak up.
Just
Just
just tweak
tweak.
just tweak a little detail, just some details. And so every Friday we had our one-on-one meetings with our PI. I had my meeting
Hmm.
first, and so
Hmm.
we're going over all my data, and as usual they're very like unpleased. They wanted more. And then before a meeting ended, they say, oh, also, when you have a chance, fill out that form about filling out hours online, because HR wanted us to do that. Because before it used to be on paper. We used to fill out all our hours that we worked on paper, but we're transitioning to computer electronically. And so they said, make sure you do this because HR is wanting to do that. I'm glad that they brought up HR because I'm like, this is a good segue to bring up that story. And so I was like, oh my gosh, speaking of HR, funny story. I grabbed coffee with person A the other day, and they invited person B, and we exchanged our research tech stories. And they found out that I moved my car from the park to the garage. And apparently, everyone at the main building of our institution knows that there's a research tech within our department that moves their car, and they know that they're working overtime and not getting paid. And apparently HR is on the hunt for the PI that's running that lab because they're just kind of shocked that they're even letting someone do that. But anyway, it's whatever. Nice meeting with you. I'll see you on Monday. And they were so frazzled. So then we sat down and they tried to, tell me to like hush up, like, okay, why? First, they got mad at me. They said, why would you even say that? I said, well, it's true. Like, I do move my car from the park to the garage. Well, why would you even bring that up? That's so random. Well, because my other friend, person C, genuinely does care about my health, and like they want to make sure that I don't walk too far at night, and the metro is kind of a far walk. Well, next time, don't even bring it up. Okay, don't worry. And if HR questions you, you never did that. Okay, just say you don't know. Okay, fine. I won't bring it up. And so we kind of like went through our plans again and again and again until I reassured them, don't worry, I will never bring it up again. And so they were happy about that. And so finally I left their office. I'm going back to my desk. I pass you up, and I remember they were at like the magnetic cabinet adjusting the mirror, or not the mirror, the magnets and whatnot, while you were grabbing your, no, you had your meeting with them.
Yeah.
And it was after your meeting when they were at the cabinet adjusting like some calendar while we were both kind of packing up. And
They made a joke.
they
Were
made a
like,
yes, they made, what did they
yeah,
say? They said,
it's
oh,
something about
maybe
something. I don't honestly remember. It's something like
no, they
Jerry don't.
said maybe we should call you the person who moves his car in our lab as a joke.
Uh-huh,
Something like
uh-huh.
that. And then I don't know how, but we just kind of both knew. Like you looked at me and you acted brand new and you said, oh my gosh, you're that person. You're that research tech who moves his car. And then I acted brand new too. What do you mean? And then you're like, my friend, you said something like my friend who is rotating or is a grad
Yeah,
student has heard about the
yeah. They're
lab, has heard about that lab, and they've been trying to find out which lab that is so that they don't join it. And they've been telling all their grad student friends. And I was like, what, really? And then you're like, yeah, and apparently HR is also trying to find out the PI of that lab so that they can talk to them. And then our PI looked at you, looked at me, looked at you, looked at me. Darian, come back to my office. We need to go over your data again. And me, I'm so gullible. I'm like, okay. So I grabbed all my paperwork, thinking that we'll actually go over the data. We go into their office. And I think at that point you left to go catch the shuttle. And then me and PI are sitting down. They're like, okay, moving forward, don't bring that up ever again. If HR asks you if you move your car, just say, you come in late. And so because you come in late, you have to make up those hours, which I knew was a lie because I came into lab around 8, 9 every day to do behavioral studies. And I would leave around midnight, 1 a.m. And so they were trying to gaslight me. I just wanted to be on their good side, and I really didn't want to argue with them. And so I said, you're right. Yeah, I'll just say that just to please them.
I think they also said that sometimes you take lunch breaks.
Oh my,
So you
they
gotta
said,
make up time for your lunch breaks.
right. And my lunch breaks are like 30, 40 minutes, really short. And their other excuse was, well, sometimes you would grab dinner at your desk and you would eat dinner pretty late. And so that's still, that time doesn't count part of your 40 hours. And I'm like, I'm already staying late. If I'm going to stay late, yes, I am going to grab dinner here. And I know that's not going to count part of that's not the point. And
Yeah.
that was so, so frustrating. I definitely want to talk more about this story later on because this is just the tip of the iceberg. But unfortunately, I feel like we are out of time today. But I really do want to bring you on so we can continue talking about this. It's so good catching up with you. All right. What are your future plans, Jessi? What are you planning to do in the next year or two?
Pass all my med school classes.
Sexy. So we cannot wait for you to become a beautiful, smart, fabulous, sexy doctor.
Dr. Cox.
And if my followers want to follow you or see what you're up to, where can they see you?
I guess my Instagram would be the best option, and it's Jessi Cox, Cox, regardless of however anyone else wants to spell it. 95.
Ooh, cool, cool, cool. All righty. Well, Jessi, thank you so much for being on my very first episode of my podcast, and hopefully we get to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. All righty. Bye, girl.